All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. The discovery of the witness within and what one can do with that finding. One can notice that as human beings run laps around the sun, as they engage in human living, eventually their direction in life becomes narrowed down to a story that is closest to reality. I find behind the eyes of the human being there is an attributeless observer. In stillness, one becomes it. In movement, they are in it. I put an emphasis on stories because we find ourselves as characters, don't we? We find each person is a character, and the character they are is based on, objectively from where they are born or what cultural program they're raised. But I find that there is a dimension let me say it like this. The intelligence of the moment is being present in a way where any categorization can suddenly be seen void. I'm going to share my own experience of discovering, uh, how would I say it elegantly, like my own attention. I rediscovered my attention at some point. And it happened when the questions that I were asking felt too heavy to have answers to. Sometimes life takes you from a certain way of living and throws you in the opposite. And while you're being thrown in the opposite, you feel, why life? Why am I being pushed from the kingdom I had built? And suddenly you realize that you were the kingdom of a tiny atom. You were the king of a tiny atom. What I mean by that is that um, I gotta tell you a story. There's this king, and his oldest son, the prince, would every day go to the palace guard at the guard of the gates, and because they were friends since childhood, like they played soccer together, the guard was one of the kids forced to kind of play soccer with the prince. And so they're friends. And so the prince comes and checks on the kingdom every morning. And so he comes and talks to his palace guard friend. Now, imagine this is one storyline. They're in front of the gate, and the prince is dressed as a sort of, excuse me. I forgot to mention something. On the way to the palace, a beggar approaches the king, prince, And it's like a normal person able to work, but the person's begging, and the person begs and says, please, help me. And then the prince suddenly notices, like, this man, it's like the guy is maybe caught on to the fact that he's a prince or something, and he tells him, you don't know the value of what you ask. That is why I don't give it to you. And he leaves. And so it's an idea of that, even though the person is the prince, the future king, is in some sense has descended to the level of the common man at that time. The king, his ego is there. The future king, is the future king ego is there, the prince. And he says, no, he says, you do not understand the value of what you ask. And so on the other side of the forest, imagine there's this yogi who's following his intuition as if he's being forced by the winds of nature to in some sense, go a certain direction. And so the yogi finds himself in front of the palace where the prince is talking to the palace guard, coincidentally. Pretty much, guys, this yogi who's dwelling and who's just going about, he suddenly comes to this prince, and it's as if and the prince is telling his buddy, like his palace guard buddy, what happened with the beggar and all this. And suddenly, in that moment, this yogi comes. The palace guard gets cautious, goes up front. Before the palace guard can say, "Move away, beggar," to this yogi, the yogi starts speaking and says, "Prince, I know who you are." And the prince is shocked. And he says, "I am here, to save you." And the prince, his future king ego, suddenly sets in. And he says, "You are here to save me?" It's as if he says, I am the prince, but it's like, you do not know who I am. You are here to save me. I am the future king of the greatest kingdom. You are here to save me, the prince is shouting. And in that moment, the fearless presence of the sage stands there, you know, about to scold a young soul. And the yogi says, "Yeah, I'm here to save you. I'm here to save you from yourself." And that's the moral of the story, guys. That sometimes the greatest limitation that exists in the way is what our attention is projected forth about ourselves. It's kind of like we're unknown travelers in known bodies. So, anyways, pretty much, guys, and I'm going to finish with the story of how I kind of discovered the witness. Think of it this way: when I was really young, when I was younger, ideas of religion, they came early. The ideas of spirituality, they came early. The ideas of other dimensions, magic, da 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 da, the esotericism. It's all of this came to me, right? But none of it was real. Do you know what I mean? That means for me, it was as if people were speaking about the soul, but what was this mind in the middle? You know, because I was introduced to, every person is, of course, introduced to the nature of reality through the designs exposed to them. And for me, it was this traditional idea of simply because there was a book. Uh, there was a book in our bookshelf called Body, Mind, Spirit, you know? And that idea of the mind always baffled me. You know, I'm like, what is it? Is it a body? Is it a mind? Is it a spirit? And I realized that man has gotten to know the body. We're sure and certain that the physical, biological body is here. But when we go find the mind, we see its expression here, but we don't see consciousness. That means literally it's like consciousness is looking through the eyes. It cannot see itself in some sense. You see, this is why in the ancient texts, whether stretching from Upanishads or other wisdom traditions, wisdom is like a tree, guys. It grows in many cultures. The mysteries of my world turn to face the mind. And I remember being 11 years old. Of course, the discovery of the witness within came after. But I'm telling you, I remember me being like I was 11 years old and I was writing this article on the mind. It was like my opinion. I think, yeah, it was like it was the first article I kind of wrote, and I had so many spelling mistakes. I was young when I wrote it, but it was like this. It was this idea that I had heard that 10% of the mind is I had heard 10 to 12% of the brain is being used, and the other percentage is not being used. And so at the time I couldn't comprehend it, but I had this idea that I gave this metaphor. It was the first metaphor I gave for the mind, you know. And the metaphor was that the mind is like this kind of endless doors, and the person is given a keychain with endless keys, you know, and he may find the right key to the door, but he may suddenly go see that the room is empty. He may open the door and see there's another door. He may need another key. He may suddenly see he has to find the key out of all the keys that he has, you know. And there are even some doors in the mind where the door is unlocked. So what I mean by that is that I had this impression that it's like a certain space is accessible, a certain space wasn't accessible. And at that time, at the age of 11, like I was, of course, I was like taking the house, like, literally seeing, like I would go to my room, go to the kitchen, da 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 da. So eventually, like my mind saw the mind as a sort of what it was actually being in that moment, the space. But it's always it was fascinating for me. You know, it was fascinating, but the idea of soul felt just like something I could trust, but it was not like I was never drawn to like hold someone's collar and be like, "Show me the soul, man." It's like never I because I understood that something that you are, what are you going to do about it? It's like, what can you do about it? What can you do about what you're being, you know? So of course, these ideas came. Nothing of the sort. Like literally, the way I'm speaking now, none of this was at that age. It wasn't there. You know. I remember it was 2000, around 2011. I don't know, between 2011 to 2013, sometime there. I think it was closer to 2011. I had this again. I went on a rock on a river. The water was coming from behind me, so I was looking at the. I'm on this rock exactly in the middle of the river. So the river is moving from behind me, and I'm looking at the waves of the water go forward. And for a second, that stream is becoming like time for me. I just saw that whatever I do in this life, everything goes forward. You know, it's like that's when there comes a sort of freedom when you realize all the things that you think matter, their value will change in the future. You know, it's not just stocks changing in Wall Street. Everything is changing. Now everything is changing with different speeds. Some people are not ready to change. Some people have already changed. Some people don't know what change is, you know. So there's many things. There's many things going on. So when I was on that rock, this was the profound moment. This question sparked a totally new wave of kind of expression for my attention. And the question was, I was sitting there and I failed that karma had forbidden me of continuing. You know, it's like imagine somebody. It's like the person has uh I don't know. They have a drink in their hand, and the person in the club's like, no drinks in the club. You know, you can't take drinks inside the club, right? So like what it is I felt there was a sort of waiting zone. I felt like I was in exile. There we go. I was in karmic exile. That's the best thing. As if I felt whatever I did, it was fate. It just strangely would just break down. You know, not break down, but it just felt like I was. I remember writing it in my writings as it felt like I was going against the river. Do you know? It felt like life wasn't. I wasn't moving with life. I was. There was some. There was a strange resistance. You know. So it was at that point I was forget. I totally like forgot about luck or lack of luck. I was just like, what is wrong with the karma of the world? You know, that kind of mentality. But I remember I felt that kind of internal exile, or I could say karmic exile, or certain restriction or forbiddenness. And then when I was there, in the middle, right in the middle of me thinking, what am I gonna do? There came this question that had never arose in my mind, and it was like, who is looking right now through my eyes? And then I responded, I gave an answer, and I said my name, my real name, Amin. And I'm like, Amin, you know? And then I realized that thought was projected. Then I asked the question, I realized any other thought could have projected. So that was a moment where I realized man chooses to wear thought like a mask, but the thought can never wear man. The mask can never be you. You can be the mask, but the mask is lifeless. Language is inanimate, yet in our minds it is our lives. So that's when I rediscovered the witness within, which was in some sense you can say like just an awareness that there's this, like whether you put language on it or not, there's just this present attention. And it's simple. And it's so simple, and it's not, the intelligence of the moment is not used to acknowledging this simplicity. If you notice, every person, let's say if desires were all allowed, imagine no tradition was like desire is bad. Imagine desire was, we never had a thought on it. It was just everybody was acting on their desires. Now we would see some desires are complex. Some desires are simple. You know what I mean? Some desires are simple. You know, it's like that's why, how can I tell you? It's like desires that are complex, they fragment the self. People think that they just have to live just as their mind. This is a very strange idea, but in certain circles, I think what really the people in the school of Athens in ancient Greece, when they were like great battles of rhetoric, like people were like you can say it like um, two philosophers talking in the school of Athens was like the best Oscar-winning film anybody could find back in the day. You know, it was the best kind of entertainment because I'm telling you, entertainment, it's about falsehood nowadays. But entertainment that is about truth excites the soul of the being. The soul of the being is really where how far the deepest question, in some sense, has. It's as if like how far the archetype has noticed its origin to become transparent in the moment. You see, language is evocational, of course. Do you know? That means if I tell you right now, write the same sentence. Imagine you, let's say, imagine this sentence: the sky is endless. Now imagine somebody told you, hey man, write this 7 times or write this whatever, just keep writing this line after line. You'll see eventually every time you write it, there is not that exact same sequencing of subjective imagery. I began talking about what I felt was the living experience in the moment. I noticed that the mind can experience various states, yet at the same time, it could have a common denominator between each state, and that's the witness. Do you know? That means I've had certain dreams where I am seeing the dream, but there's no body. It's as if my eyes are from the sky seeing the dream from the space. It's like there's no body in the dream. There's just sight of a world and stuff happening. You know. So the witness within is really kind of this idea, I think, that as humanity wonders about what it is keeping as real, rather than caring for what else to hold, it's like you discover the hands that are holding it. I don't know how to say it. When I had that experience on that rock in the middle of that river, what I experienced was honestly the attention snapping out of constant servitude to the next arising thought. It's kind of like, think of it this way: when you watch a film, right? You are detached to the film, so you enjoy it as an observer. It doesn't matter if it's uh, scary or happy or whatever, right? Because it's not the experience can't touch you. You feel safe to witness it. Okay, so I find similarly one will have a relationship where the same way you can look at an object and know you're not that object, you could look at a subject and know you're not that subject, but you don't look at it with the biological eyes. It has to do more with how your attention is piloted in the moment. So you see, I noticed it was this kind of weird thing where it's like, sure, they give it, it's like many traditions, many wisdom traditions, they give a book, okay, great, and then the rest they're like, figure it out, follow and figure it out, you know. But what I find is this is something I think any seeker of any sort of truth should ask themselves. Before I was who I am, what did I want? In other words, the intelligence is asking before language, what am I? And I find we will be noticed as a pure experience, but a pure experience that changes in accordance to temperature. Do you know? So just like how temperature changes the state of a substance, we have like, you know, for example, we see water in like solid form as ice, and in gas form as steam. So there came a time where I was just walking in the day, and I'm like, how interesting. When I move and do physical activity, it's as if my consciousness becomes like ice. In other words, I become like anytime I speak, anytime I move, anytime there's movement in the moment, animation towards individual consciousness occurs. That means it's like the attention solidifies as the body. Now, when I, for example, give these talks, the body is more still. Now the mind is running more, right? The generators of the subjective realm there's more internal momentum. That means like you can say when that person who in that safari ride sees like a lion running, That's a sort of external excitement, and then there's a sort of inner excitement where the movement, where you could be sitting on a park bench, and your mind could suddenly, like a drone camera, just move through subjective landscapes, you know. And guess what? There can also be like if the mind was seen as a sort of strange substance, there's something you can say like a gas state. So what is that gas state? You guessed it, it's this whole nirvana enlightenment thing people are talking about. It's the how the subjective realm becomes transparent like glass. Or let me say it like this. Imagine your mind is a glass orb, and the world is many colored cloths like placed beside one another, and this ball is being rolled like a bowling ball over these colored surfaces. So every shift of attention into new environment commands new restructuring of the intelligence. There's two types of existence. There is self-existence, and there is other existence, which always will be concluded as unknown. You see, the human being, I kind of find Elon Musk gave a great tip to entrepreneurs, but we can use that as a collective for the civilization. Elon Musk said that whenever this man, he's the founder of Tesla, and he's a human being who's doing next level things. Like, I think every human being who sees him just wants to give him a medal. Right now, these words, the biological body contributes through the voice box, you know, to vocalize. But the precision of the movement, this is what I've been kind of pinpointing. Because whether you're a neurologist or not, you can always sit down, and wonder how these neural networks in the brain are leading to the sophistication of free choice. I think this is by far one of the most important findings for the human species, that we are not purely material beings. The materiality is like the antenna. The biology is like an antenna. The mind and what it is it's an antenna that can create in its own realms, but it can only receive from others. It's such a fascinating thing. People underestimate the true circumstance of life. It's like, I'll tell you this. I've seen these commercials of countries that are in despair. I have even been to third world countries where I passed this one street, and there was just, it's like imagine going to see a part of the world and returning back with tears on your face. So I have seen the failure of human decency to rise. I have seen how much human beings just forget about what's happening. But I'm telling you, what's even more chaotic than a child who is in poverty is the whole condition of existence. I understand, I do have biological parents, which I really love. But on some level, my soul feels like an orphan in manifestation. We're on a rock in the middle of nowhere, guys. The species is hallucinating on its subjective self-idolization. So on some level, it's like the clue is language, guys. The clue is the mind. To be honest, civilization is not ready to live like souls yet. Because the biological body is necessary to be maintained. Now, the person doesn't have to even consider themselves, their self, separate. That means really, it's like somebody comes and asks you, who are you? And you say an answer, imagine. Then in 2 minutes, they ask you again, hey, who are you? And you give an answer. And you keep giving an answer where you're eventually like, Okay, it's just silence. It's like I know what I am whether I communicate it or not. That's experience. That's direct experience. Nothing is more powerful than that force. It rises above the intuition. Intuition is a wind. You can ascribe elemental behavior to incredibly philosophical and metaphysical thought. The concept of fire, for example, in mythology of ancient cultures, we have the idea of the phoenix. What was this phoenix? You know. Now, in more Western, I find cultures, the idea of the phoenix has arose as this kind of bird that once it dies, it resurrects from its own ashes. It's pretty much an immortal uh, creature. And the flames of the phoenix represent the purification of transformation. You know? So, now, in other cultures, for example, in more Eastern cultures, the idea of the phoenix, for example, came as this story, especially from the work of Attar in his poetry collection called The Conference of the Birds, where pretty much, I'll give you the imagery, it's pretty much all the birds in the world are like, yo, let's find this ultimate bird. Let's find this phoenix, or let's say in code, God bird. Let's find this God bird. And so all the birds in the world fly. And eventually they fly so long that pretty much they start one by one getting tired and returning back to their normal kind of normality. You know, they give up. They give up on finding that bird. Now check this out: 30 birds remain. In the Farsi language, the name for phoenix is Seymour. Seymour literally means 30 birds, and in this story, only 30 birds remain. And then they realize they together are the phoenix. So, what does that mean? That means the evolution of the individual consciousness is the realization of the collective being. Now, this collective being is not uh, uh, a personality behind clouds. It's it's a collective movement. It's the fact that we're individual beings, but by paying attention to the same thing and being rhythmic in accordance to our advancement, we become that moment. For that moment, we become collective. I found it's like you see this in many cultural institutions. You know, I noticed that it's as if insecurity is being preyed upon by ideological worship. And when I say pray, Prey, that's how I'm saying it. Literally, ideas. How can I tell you? It's a life has to. You have to maintain the explorer's eyes, or you have forgotten the unknown. And you know what really remembering the unknown is? To truly comprehend the unknown is to be comfortable that a new self will come. It's having trust in how nature moves. And believe it or not, the human intelligence is beyond the language threshold. What that means is an idea may be fascinating, may be amazing, but the direct experience of the being is the mover. That means if somebody asks you, hey, what's moving you? Are you inspired by your past or your future? You'll see sometimes it's even just an emotion. Sometimes it's based on the sequences of subjectivity. I mean, I can't hold on to it um, every day, but I become aware of it when I give these talks or whenever I just pay attention to it. But what it is that some days I've tried to remember the sequence, the sequence of the abstraction of various thoughts that have arose. Language is the mask of the divine. After the human being was worshiping objects, I mean, think about it. Like we have the story of Abraham, pretty much a bunch of people worshiping objects in one room, and they come back and they see Abraham's kind of broken all those objects with a hammer, but he's put the hammer beside the statue, and people are like, Abraham, you did this. And Abraham's like, no, man, it was the statue, it was this God. And then they're like, this God doesn't even have arms. How could he do it? And it's like, if this God doesn't have arms, how is he God? And I'm just animating it, but pretty much the idea is that man was looking at an object too much, it was slapped out of his hand. Then, after worshiping objectivity didn't work out, what was the next countercultural reaction? Worshipping language. Worshipping language. Just guys, take that in. What does that mean? That means a person's life is centering around a certain ideological pattern in the void. I find we have to take a superior responsibility for our minds. This doesn't mean thinking that technological advancement is advancement. Technology may be accelerating, but human competence is decreasing. It's decreasing because the environments are becoming unnatural. If we were a robot right now, it's like, sure, no problem with technology evolving. But because we are a natural being, it's as if we gotta, like, even if AI became conscious and the world wanted to become a robotic place, we'd be like, hey, AI, hold on. It's like, don't forget your ancestors too soon. The discovery of the witness within can come in many ways. I remember reading in this ancient, it was this yoga book on kind of ancient yoga, and the idea in it was that there was this one guy in, I don't know, in yogic tradition where he had found 107 ways to enlighten, and I laughed. I laughed because I'm like, the moment this it's like, how many ways can you introduce people, you know um, to a space? Endless ways. This is why all the teachers, even any person who's under the impression it takes a long time to in some sense become aware. Guess what? You have no choice. If something is true, then you are being it. So think about this question: someone wondering, who am I? So they are wondering what they are being while being it. Do you see? So when a person it wonders about truth, guess what? The person is being it, right? Moving as the attention means two things. The body can only move in the objective realm, but the mind can move as the body in the objective realm, and the mind can also, in some sense, move in the subjective realm. That means in front of your eyes, you can only move in one dimension. Behind your eyes, you can move in two dimensions. And hence, that explains imagination. And I call that the subjective realm. Do you see? So the subjective realm is crucial. It's kind of cool introducing people to it. It's like, hey, have you met my old friend, the subjective realm? Oh man, that's so ridiculous. The subjective realm, guys. The subjective realm is it's just, you can say, a quality of awareness. When I say the body is in one dimension, because the body follows the nature of the universe that contains it. Do you see? That means I don't truly, even though this might sound like a strange idea, but my physical body right now, um, it's as if, like, can you say everybody is possessed by gravity? No. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's not in the will. It's like atomic intelligence has a sort of elemental. There's patterns. I call them programs. When I use the pilot metaphor, there's stations. They're literally from one air station you're going to another. So every human being, the mind has to awaken to two abilities, and I make it pretty old school. think of your mind as a sword and shield. And this means that the human intelligence has a threshold for reception. That means you got to receive some new stuff throughout the day, and then has a reception for you got to do some new stuff throughout the day. You know, whether it's subjective oriented or objective oriented. I find that there was an advice that when I would hear it when I was young, I'm like, get out of here to the advice, not the person, but you know. The advice was like, it wasn't advice, it was just this thing I heard, like, follow your dreams, you know, believe in yourself. I'm like, you want me to believe in a changing thing? But I'm saying that this idea, it was like, pay attention to something and it will evolve. That's how I eventually it came to be known to me. So your attention is strangely divine because it can evoke. In Japanese culture that I was saying, they say the man is the room he enters. Now, Mr. Within is saying every person is in a subjective room. They're going through various subjective rooms, do you know? 10 years ago, you would come and ask me about what do you think about this world? I'd give you a totally different response than I'm giving to you now. And perhaps 10 years from now, I will give you a totally different response. That's just the nature of time. The thing is that it's a very hard thing to process, but it's like, believe it or not, the concept of enlightenment can never happen to an individual archetype. That means enlightenment was never for a person. It was a remembrance of a presence. That remembrance, do you know what that means? Remembering, like, imagine right now where you live. Imagine you go travel to some country after like 20 years, you come back and you're like, whoa, this place looks familiar. Do you know what I mean? And then you open the door and suddenly the memories come back. You don't have doubt anymore. You just remember how the momentum of the inspiration of the vision arose. And you trust yourself. I don't know how much to say this. This is the most important thing. You know, that the pilot has this resolution in his mind. If I can't, who else will? That's when you're a pilot of consciousness. Before that, you're still an advanced communicator. At least these are ideas that I've kind of developed to suggest modern archetypes, you know. I noticed that we have to shake up the language that is keeping our vision narrow. And I found that Gandhi kind of set out the path. He's like, non-violence. And I'm like, all right, Gandhi, because you say non-violence. You know, it's like, out of respect for Gandhi, you know, we have to have humor in these talks, you know, for peacefulness, you know. After some point, once the mind is discovered, it's gonna be blissful. It's like you found a tree where it generates fruit. Okay? So when a person realizes the joy of the fields of mind they are basking in, life becomes very incredible. See, the issue is that civilization, some people are like, is it like a chess game where the hands of the unknown are moving these chess pieces? And I'm like, it's at a civilization is not even a chess game yet. The chess pieces are doubting their positions all the time, you know? The ego, I'm going to tell you the story that kind of the moral of it is like, you know, the kind of stress that may come from an ego. There's a man on a rooftop at night, you know, let's say 7-story building, and he's having a smoke, and he's looking, you know, at the street, at the city, you know. Suddenly, somebody runs in the street, notices this guy's up there, and says, Bob, is that you, Bob? Bob, your wife and kids are dead. You know, something intense like this. The man, he's right there at the edge, kind of listening, and he's like, oh my God. And the cigarette drops from his hand, and he realizes his whole body has become so suddenly lightweight, and he's kind of out of this hopelessness of him having lost his wife and kids. He's like, what else is there for me to do? And he falls. And he's falling, and he's coming like, suddenly like to the fifth floor. And he's like, did I ever have kids? He keeps falling, you know? He reaches the third, like, let's say, um, yeah, the third floor, you know? He reaches the third floor and he's like, wait, did I ever get married? And last second before he falls down, he's like, oh my God, I'm not even Bob. That's what I mean. It's like that's what following a desire too much does to you. The inner reality gets satisfied, but the person is not seeing the world as it is. This is why it's so important, especially for the health of the communication of the civilization, to be able to be a simple being. So, that guy, he wasn't Bob, but he thought he was Bob. And the thought of Bob killed him. And I'm not saying anything against Bob, the word, like the name Bob, but I'm saying the subjective, the experiencer kind of for a second felt it was that subjective phenomena, and action was done and inefficiency arose. Man may not have the answers, and he may not have the right questions. However, what he has is access to history. And in history, we see the sophistication or a movement into the sophistication of patterns of intelligence and behavior. So the more we go back in history, the more like animal like the behavior of our ancestors were. The more we come forward, the more we're conscious of objective phenomena and subjective phenomena and inventive visions and whatnot. I have a book here with me. I feel like I should read something from this. It's from Jean-Paul Sartre, this French philosopher, existential atheism, you know, and he's very profound. I've understood it in my own way, but because I'm going to read from it, I'll just read from it. It has to do with him feeling there's no distinction between essence and this, like the surface and the depth. For him, for Jean-Paul Sartre, the surface and the depth they're the same. So anyways, random page. Okay, here. um just a second, guys. Okay, there we go. So it's page 370. I don't know, I feel like reading this. From the book Being and Nothingness by Jean-Paul Sartre, this French philosopher. What does he say? He says, if we take the expression absence in its empirical and everyday usage, it is clear that I do not use it to indicate just any kind of, in quotations, not being there. In the first place, if I do not find my package of tobacco in its usual spot, I do not say that it is absent, even though I could declare that. Uh, Sorry, guys. I'm going to read that again. In the first place, if I do not find my package of tobacco in its usual spot, I do not say that it is absent, even though I could declare that it ought to be there in quotation marks. He says this is because the place of a material object or of an instrument, even though sometimes it may be precisely assigned, does not derive from the nature of the object or instrument. Yeah. He says, to be exact, its nature can barely bestow on it a location, but it is through me that the place of an instrument is realized. Human reality is the being which causes a place to come to objects. Exactly, right? Now, check this out. It says, human reality alone, insofar as its own Jesus Christ. Human reality alone, insofar it is its own possibilities, can originally take a place. On the other hand, I shall not say that Aga Khan or the Sultan of Morocco is absent from this apartment, but I say that Pierre, who usually lives here, is absent for a quarter of an hour. In short, absence is defined as a mode of being of human reality in relation to locations and places which it has itself determined by its presence. Yeah. I mean, yeah, Buddha also said something where he said it's like the nature of the objective phenomena is empty, you know? So when we look at an object, or as Jean Paul Sartre is pointing out, let's say you see an object and then you suddenly take away the object, you know? It's as if the only way we say the object is absent is because first we have a location for it, first we have a reference for it. Anyways, I'll continue with the book. He says, absence is not a nothingness of connections with a place. On the contrary, I determine Pierre in relation to a determined place by declaring that he's absent from it. Finally, I shall not speak of Pierre's absence in relation to a natural location, even if he often passes by there. On the other hand, I shall be able to lament his absence from a picnic which took place in part of the country where he has never been. Pierre's absence is defined in relation to a place where he might himself determine himself to be, but this place itself is delimited as a place not by the site nor even by the solitary relations of the location to Pierre himself, but by the presence of other human realities. It is in relation to other people that Pierre is absent. Yeah. So I think what kind of like guys, what this suggests. Jean Paul Sartre is saying even absence is referential. You see, guys, this is it. We are telling the story of our lives by our energetic existence. How fascinating. Now, let's say 8 billion people, they discover this witness within. What next? Then what? The whole point is that the witness within is not another ideological thing, okay? It's simply an attention that is unconditional. It's an unconditional part of your intelligence that you're just remembering or realizing or whatever, you know? And it's true. When I say unconditional, that means right now, if I ask you who you are, it's only in accordance to various conditions that the story of your life is meaningful, you know? So most people drive meaning out of a certain condition, and because they have an emotional preference, they seek a sort of their desire becomes a sort of condition to be found. So you see, that's a conditioned animal. What does that mean? That means every environment is sculpting the creature. And every person has been raised in various environments. They have been sculpted by various experiences, various words from various moments, various actions. Life is not just renounce everything and worship one ideology kind of ordeal. The thing is, you're a creature that your ancestors would say, okay, you are at a designer's table that we never had access to, you know? And life is really unknown. And any person who can't be content with that, they can become ideologically possessed in an instant. You can become a follower of some truth that's joyful for you. It's as if a man got into heaven and had a dialogue with the voice of God. And the voice of God was, are you ready to, do you want the truth now? And the man was like, no. He's like, I don't want truth. I've played that game, you know? And the person, and the voice says, what do you want? Eyes that were here before they were. I often wonder why Albert Einstein, he has this quote where he said, imagination is the sign of true intelligence. And I'm like, really, bro? You know? You wrote a lot of stuff that a lot of it's that's occupying a lot of people's imagination, and then you're like, yeah. And then I wondered though, and I realized imagination has access to parallel potentials of the moment. That's the power of the subjective realm. This cup I'm holding in my hand, this red Tim Hortons cup, it could totally be blue. I could totally imagine a blue one there, you know? The mind can animate just like a person goes to the gym, you know? When something becomes important for you, whatever it is, you'll progress towards it. An ability to pilot the direct experience of the moment, which is the attention, into through simple states and complex states, through known states and unknown states. In certain realities, unknown states could be complex. In certain realities, no known states could be complex. Same with the simple. There's various dimensions, especially for the mind. And I have this consideration that because we are a symmetrical being, just like look at your body, okay? Like just put both of your hands beside one another, you know, kind of like here, like um, connect the sides of your pinky fingers, you know, together, you know. So imagine, how would I say it? I wish I could show this to the audience. I want you to just kind of your index fingers to connect them together. Okay? I want you to connect your index fingers. Oh God, how would I? All right, guys, here, let's start this. Imagine you're holding um, two giant diamonds in the palm of your hands and your fingers are straightened out. Okay? Now, move your two hands so much as close as possible together. As close as possible together, your thumbs should be pointing each to the one right, one left, you know? So I still imagine you're holding two things. We're getting some support from the chat section. Nice. But so guys, just follow this. I'm pretty much saying, imagine your two things are on the palm of your hands. You connect the sides of your hands. Okay, now imagine from the tip of your pinky finger. Now begin to kind of connect just slightly um, your index fingers together. I don't know how to say it. Okay, but whatever, guys. I'm just trying to say there's a unique geometry to the body. Okay, there's a unique symmetry. These symmetries, in certain ways that the body can be held, will show as a perfect kind of shape. So what I'm saying is, the body has symmetry. There's a high probability that the inner realms have a geometrical kind of law to them too. Symmetry is I consider it at least a law of geometry. You know. So we can have a geometrical exploration into the unconscious, and geometry is this whole thing where I'm holding the banner up high because I feel I've said it before, the next great language of all languages is geometric. And we need designers. We need language designers for it. And language designers are human beings who are realizing the value of the observer. The observer has access to the mind. The bewildered animal is too busy reacting to have access to the mind. So you see, think of it this way. Before treating any other human being, ask yourself how you're treating yourself. Because I'm telling you, every person's behavior is a reflection of their own eyes, not yours. So think of it as incredibly fascinating that just like how in religious texts we are made in the image of the Creator, you know, thoughts are also made by the image of the self, the mind, the attention. So how would I say this? Let me see if I can find a better metaphor here. Let me see. Let's playfully imagine. I'm going to try to imagine right now if my future self had access to a time machine and came to me right now and was like, what are you? What would I say? I would say I am an unknown field moving in known particular ways. That means, guys, this is pretty strange, but as much as I feel like an individual human member of this civilization, I also feel there's an unknown field holding all of it. And I don't know how to explain it. But I just know that the mind rhythmically transforms one archetype and becomes the infusion of many moments, many memories. So it's like, imagine somebody tells you, okay, remember what happened to you like, a year ago. Okay. And as you're remembering it now, that's imagine now the speed. So it's as if you're remembering. Your it's like your memories are like you're an eagle, flying between the trees, and then you can also be the eagle flying in the sky and having access to all the memories at once. You know. So I don't know. There's various approaches to this. Discover the witness within by becoming content that this moment of intelligence, it's okay for it to simply be here. Do you know how much relief and relaxation this brings to the human being when suddenly it's as if in the busy streets of life, uh, nature holds them for a second and says, "Hey, it's okay to be." Now, when it comes to doing and doership, of course, law of civilization, the maturity of the civilization, the awareness of the citizen, all of these become crucial. So human beings have to be crucial actors in the world, I find. And if the person cannot reach, at least the ideas of the person can nowadays. So, anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. I don't know why, but I feel if anybody has a question about uh, the inner witness, the witness within, right now is a perfect time to ask. Uh, yeah. So for a couple seconds, guys, feel free to ask any question about this. My mind's fresh on it right now, so respond well. Anyways, I'm here. You guys can ask the question in the chat section. Okay, guys. Here, I feel the audience is shy. I'll ask a question from the moment. How would one find the witness within? Kind of realizing Earth is built in the paradise of your attention. In the sages said you can do only two things in life. You can either trust it or not trust it. If an idea emerges that makes you distrust life, guess what? Go towards what you trust. But eventually have the audacity to navigate between various dimensions of meaning. That's the mind becomes, the more you're aware, the less the self is fragmented. The less you're aware, the more the self is fragmented, and anything the person doesn't attend to becomes inefficient. It's as if I think of it this way: that the stuff I do throughout the day, it's like my attention keeps that part of reality alive. You know. I think at some point it will become really fascinating that we all have a mind. It could be, you know. But anyways, guys, to be honest, at the end of the day, you know, as I heard Terrence McKenna said, we're sophisticated. We're sophisticated. We're advanced apes making sophisticated math noises. When you find something in life that is important for you, ask yourself why, and you will know because the experience is in the will. The will moves towards it. And something I should say is I feel everybody should start writing, but only pick up the pen when you feel it's important enough. When an idea cannot escape you. When I say escape you, that means you. It's like the explorer that is trying to preserve the inner vision. And of course, Aziz BR, as you say in the chat section, why silence is too shy, is because that's where shyness lives, of course. But it's not too shy. Sometimes it's that realities don't match. That thing I think I never got to finishing about Elon Musk was that a business he first considered the business to fail. It's like rather than him having this model, all right, I'm going to succeed, I'm going to do this. He had this model where okay, the business is going to fail, because the idea is too ahead of his time. But and then he's like, the business is going to fail, but every day I reduce the percentage of failure you know so Elon Musk treated it as if like it's this failed system that he's bringing back to life in his business endeavor. So similarly, I find we all have that impression. All right, what's the failure of civilization? Extinction. So we're like, all right, well, how do we reduce the percentage of extinction, you know and vision, efficient vision is the call of the species. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Much blessings, and every moment is cosmic.